We want to go to some video excerpts. Take a look at people losing their sense of control. I mean, it's a total state of hysteria.
More. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Jesus.
And Lord, if it blows our little minds, let them be blown. Father, we want all of what you have. All of what you have. We thank you.
Hallelujah.
Amen.
Hallelujah.
When you see things like this, pandemonium, I mean, hysteria, altered states of consciousness, people acting insane. You can look at the eyes of many of these people you've seen on this video tonight, and you know it was not of God.
Lord just reminded me of the old hymn, where he leads, I will follow.
What's going on, everyone? Jeremy here from The Quartering, and all of the reviews are out on The Last of Us 2, and many Last of Us fans have come to my Twitter to gloat that the totally unbiased media gave it a universally high score. Now, honestly, I don't think in the maybe 10 or 15 videos I've made covering this that I've ever said, that the game wouldn't sell well. I also don't think I ever said that the game wouldn't be quote-unquote good, because I've never been fully invested in the story like many of the people. Most of my interest in The Last of Us 2 came around the leaks and just in and of themselves, and the subsequent DMCA issues from Sony, and then DMCA issues from Musso on memes, and that whole mess. Look, in fact, I've also said in my videos that if you're looking forward to the game, I hope you like it. Because why wouldn't I? If you play a game that you enjoy, then I'm happy for you. Today, the reviews dropped, and zoinks, it is almost universally saying that the game is the best of all time, except for the two big boys like Kotaku and Polygon. They had to be contrarian, apparently. And also, guess what? The entire game is on YouTube again. Before I get into the full story, just a quick word from this video sponsor. This video is sponsored by Raid Shadow Legends. Raid Shadow Legends will take you to the world of dark fantasy and realism. Available for mobile and PC. Use my links in the description below to download Raid yourself to your mobile phone or PC. Here's an interesting fact about Raid. It has 16 different factions. Orcs, dwarves, undead hordes, and many more. My personal favorite, the Corrupted. The Corrupted are evil. They have sided with or been created by the corruption emanating from the Dark Portal. These are the big bads, people like Dark Elves, Demon Spawn, Knights Revenant, Undead Hordes. You just feel super BA in this faction. There are also a ton of tournaments going on in the game. You can compete against the entire Raid community while fighting in the Spider's Den, Ice Golem's Peak, the Almighty Fire Knight, or the Notorious Dragon. And now you can compete in the brand new Arena Tournament, earn points according to your tier, and win awesome rewards in the local and global tournaments. You can find me under the nickname Colt's Dad, and I would love for you to follow the links in the description below. Go to the video description, click on the special links, and if you're a new player, you'll get 100,000 silver, 1 energy refill, 50 gems, and 1 free champion, the Executioner. Look at how cool the Executioner is, and you get it for free. You'll also find extra rewards here in your inbox for the next 30 days. So follow the link in the description below or the pinned comment to give Raid Shadow Legends a try, and definitely add me in. I look forward to seeing you in game. All right, I know I appreciate all of you. Legitimately, use the links in my pinned comment below and come play with me. I legitimately play the game. Now, I don't know if it's as good as The Last of Us, but nonetheless. So, let's take a look at some of the headlines. The Last of Us Part 2 review. We're better than this. Uh-oh. The Last of Us Part 2, a profound, harrowing sequel. The Last of Us Part 2 on PS4 draws near universal acclaim. The Last of Us Part 2 review, we are the virus. It is as brutal as it is daring. One of the best video games ever made. The Last of Us Part 2, the Kotaku review. By the way, they gave it a 70, I think, or that was Kotaku Japan. I saw the leaks and I thought I knew. I was still not prepared for The Last of Us Part 2. Well, you're a poet and you didn't even know it. A quick view of the Metacritic reviews have it at a 96%. 96. Watch Post 100%. VG247 100%. 100%. 100. All these hundreds. Now, IGN Japan, the only outlier here, if we look at all the critic reviews, this is impressive. I mean, we don't know if, you know, most of these reviews are just about the narrative of the game and why it was so amazing. There may be a time in my life where I actually play the game. Again, not super invested in the franchise. 100% from IGN. The Last of Us Part 2 is a masterpiece that evolves the gameplay, cinematic storytelling, and the rich world design of the original in nearly every way. Trusted reviews. The Last of Us Part 2 is a masterful swan song for the PlayStation 4 and arguably at its finest, the most accomplished project Naughty Dog has ever embarked on. All these hundreds. Just everybody giving... You know, first of all, if you're a video game reviewer, let me put it this way. If you're a video game reviewer and you give any game ever 100%, I don't ever believe you. There isn't a game out there that is perfect in every way. It just doesn't exist. 100% is supposed to be a mythical goal. Just like, you know, there are very few games to ever be a 0 or like a 10. Day one, Gary's, whatever that was, or Gary's project, whatever, okay, maybe their games. But if you're giving it 100%, then you're a hack. I'm not kidding. Look at all these 100s. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, over 25, maybe, oh, geez, 30 100s, 40 probably. You are not doing your job. Giving a game 100% is like saying, is literally saying there's absolutely nothing that could be improved on the game. That's pretty hacky, in my opinion. If we look at the people that, you know, the worst reviews, we're still 70s. Game Revolution says, this excessive padding and theoretically noble attempt to dive into deeper subjects also negatively affects the gameplay too, as even its ace combat mechanics can't quite stay fresh and exciting when repeated over and over and over the span of 30 hours. What's left is a bloater that's forsaken enough of its soul to just barely still be recognizable in its current form, shuffling around and proving that, unlike Ellie, it is not immune to developing into a lesser form of itself. Gaming Bible says, as a video game sequel, it ticks all the boxes of being bigger and better with more to say. But the story, as an experience following the most critically acclaimed tales ever told in this medium, it sits uncomfortably on the knife's edge, waiting for the passage of time to pull it one way or the other. IGN Japan says, The Last of Us Part 2 tries too hard to differentiate itself from its predecessor. While astonishing cityscapes and more varied combat options are great evolutions, Part 2 lacks the poetic serenity that made the original road movie like epic such a masterpiece. On top of that, uninteresting new characters burden the story, making Ellie's journey feel conventional and not nearly as captivating as the original. But, you know, again, I should say, almost universally 100% scores. And look, I mean, if we look at maybe, what if we look at, let's compare it to the all-time, right? The all-time PS4 games, right? Let's say all-time best PS4 games of all time. That's what we want. So they're putting it essentially as good as Red Dead Redemption 2, Grand Theft Auto 5, and The Last of Us Part 2, Persona 5 Royale. I mean, okay, maybe. The Last of Us Remastered, that had a 95%. God of War. So they're basically putting this as Game of the Year very easily, right? And these games, I mean, significantly better than The Witcher 3? I don't know about that. Final Fantasy 15 Shadowbringers, 91, that's probably high. Shadow of the Colossus, that's a classic. I suppose you could argue that some of these games are here and there, but essentially, it's 1 point away from being the best PlayStation 4 game ever. So it's entirely possible that it will reach that threshold, which will be interesting. You know, we'll find out more about it. You know, as of right now, the entire game, again, is on YouTube. The entire 3 hours still here on YouTube. And there are great lines like, a bigot sandwich, and all sorts of stuff like that. And if we look at the comments, you know, people aren't really happy with it. Most of these people, you know, I don't know. Here's a top comment. I haven't been this disappointed with a game franchise since Mass Effect 3 ending. Now, if you look at the Polygon review, this one's bizarre. The Last of Us Part 2 review, we're better than this. Did you know that ending people is wrong? The sequel feels like a time capsule from 2013, the year the first game was released in real life, and the year a fictional game in a zombie outbreak. The Last of Us Part 2 seems doomed to walk a well-worn circle, unable to break out of its ever-thickening carapace forming along its skin, just like the victims of cordyceps fungus that you fight throughout the game. That's the game's central problem, which makes it so much of a challenge to get through. This is the story about characters who seem unable to learn or grow, and more specifically, unable to consider the humanity of the people they end. If you already think doing this type of thing isn't the answer to many of the world's problems, then the repeated lesson of deleting is bad makes the game almost maddening. I don't have any problem empathizing with the people who I am asked to end in the video games. The Last of Us Part 2 must think I'll struggle with it, though, since it doles out all sorts of reasons why I should feel regret about the deletion spree its characters have embarked on. But the game's larger problem is that the characters themselves don't even seem to catch up with me. What's worse is the characterization of Ellie, and it seems like she should also understand that this is part of the journey. I kept expecting her to grow and turn away from a life of constant bad behavior, but she never picks up on the obvious dyadic nature of the game she's in. Even as the designers beat you over the head with a very simple lesson about the value of human life. Part 2 is a game about not rising above revenge or bad urges in general. It's filled with characters dedicated to never seeing the bigger picture beyond themselves. Although the game's backdrop is a global situation, we'll say, and also it reaches towards the idea of larger injustices by depicting two warring human factions, the cult of the Seraphites and the militaristic Washington Liberation Front. It's really just a story about a teen girl, her damage, and her apparent belief that the only way to get over the trauma is ending people. A lot of ending people. I mean, it's interesting that you would be mad that a game... What did you want? Your video game didn't teach you a lesson about life, so you're mad about it? You know, I don't know. It's such a bizarre thing to see Polygon step out and dog this game. You know, the story seems to think I need experience ridiculous levels of virtual bad behavior in order to believe that maybe, just maybe, Ellie should have learned a little more about her enemies' personal situations and motivations before slamming a baseball bat into their skulls. Playing The Last of Us 2, a game that supposes that humans will enact bad behavior upon each other to their dying breaths, is a very strange thing in 2020. Naughty Dog created a world in which people across America react to a massive structural crisis by dividing and disconnecting from others, rather than uniting together to demand something better. Well, that's probably what would happen. That's probably the reality of humanity. I see a widespread level of selflessness, and an intense care for the preservation of human life in the real 2020. In fact, it's an increasingly loud demand for a society that meets our need. The Last of Us Part 2 depicts individual people who are instead ruthless, capable, yet self-absorbed, and whose perception of the bad behavior is limited to how it affects them and their chosen family members. They are almost unbelievably unable to see the bigger picture. Part 2 ends up feeling needlessly bleak at a time when we need when a nihilistic worldview has perhaps never been less attractive. Its characters are surviving, but they're not learning, and they're certainly not making anything better. Interesting. Maybe the most surprising thing is that The Last of Us 2 offered me was the surety that while the game was made with great skill and craft, we are actually much, much better than Naughty Dog thinks we are. Wow. That's pretty bizarre. So their entire game review here is just, they don't like the story. They don't like that the characters don't learn a lesson. Well, if you play games like, you know, Red Dead Redemption 2, there are some characters that learn lessons. There are characters that don't learn lessons. And I think that's more realistic than necessarily expecting everybody to grow and change, because the fact of the matter is most people don't. Most people say exactly who they are to the bitter end, regardless of how many times it backfires on them. Ultimately, you see The Last of Us Kotaku review. This one, same thing. The game sends you on a revenge quest. They talk about, you know, it's difficult to talk about all this the week before. Most of you reading can play the game for yourself. In a recent fawning piece in the British GQ, Druckmann is quoted saying, "There were people at Naughty Dog, a minority of them, that were just stuck on how brutal the game is and how dark and quite cynical it is about mankind. That even the people who made the game are divided about its clear sign that players are going to have radically different experiences. The game's first story was polarizing, and this one will clearly be as well. So many of us worked on the game for so long and at such cost that I want The Last of Us 2 to be more than in the experience I had. It was visually beautiful game that feels distinct to play, and the story it tells, however it tells it, at the most basic level, certainly pushes the edges of what games have done before. None of those accomplishments elevated or redeemed it for me, like the nature consuming Seattle or the outbreak consuming humanity. Its ugliness overshadowed everything else." Kotaku and Polygon rated the game poorly, both for the same reason. They didn't like that it was bleak. They wanted it to have a happy ending. That's bizarre. That's really bizarre coming from these two outlets. It'd be interesting to hear what you have to say about it. Are you going to cave and get the game? Were you already going to get the game? Are you going to just watch the 2 hours and 46 seconds of the game that currently exist on YouTube? What do you think the sales will look like next week? I hope you enjoyed this video. We'll talk again real soon.